We're often asked whether or not a Roth conversion is really worth doing. I thought I'd take some time today in this video, kind of walk through that situation with a real client and show you where the benefit comes from and how much that benefit conceivably can be. My name is Greg Welborn. I'm with First Financial Consulting. So again, I've said this is a real client situation. And the trick to understanding the whole Roth conversion benefit is dependent on understanding kind of what we call the tax buckets, understanding where you can put your assets and how they get treated. I've come up with an illustration here to show you 4 different buckets. We have one called the ordinary income bucket. Think about this as your wages, rental income, non-qualified interest, dividends, short-term capital gains. These are all taxed as regular income. So the tax rate federally, at least, is going to be anywhere from 0% to 37%. The next taxable bucket, if you will, is called long-term capital gains. This literally are gains that come from the long-term holding, 1 year or more, of capital assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, artwork, cars, anything that you are investing in, owning for more than 1 year, and then sell, and there's a gain or a loss. That's a capital gain or a capital loss. Capital gains tax rates are 0 to 20%. There is, depending upon your income level, a possible extra 3.8 excise tax, but let's just for the moment look at this as being 0 versus 20%. So notice that the capital gains tax rates are lower than the income tax rates. The next bucket I want to talk about is the tax-deferred bucket. And these are retirement assets. So think of 401ks, 403bs, 457s, traditional IRAs, SEP, simples, etc. Anything that is a qualified retirement plan. Typically, when you put money into that plan, you get a tax deduction. So from Uncle Sam's perspective, he feels like this is income that you should have paid a tax on. In other words, let's look at the ordinary income bucket. These are wages that you said, wait a minute, I don't want to pay taxes on it. I want to put it in a qualified retirement plan, and I want to get a benefit from it. And Uncle Sam says, okay, you get a deduction for the contribution. It's called tax deferred because while it's in this qualified plan, the IRA, the SEP, the 401k, etc., any growth in it is not taxed. So each year, these accounts can grow without any tax being incurred whatsoever. But when you start withdrawing from the tax-deferred bucket, then Uncle Sam comes back and says, look, it was going to be taxed in the beginning. We're still going to tax it. We've given you a long deferral period. Now as you withdraw, we're going to tax it. And it's taxed at the same regular income tax rates as ordinary income. So again, 0 to 37%. You'll notice there's one last bucket, the tax-free bucket. There really are tax-free accounts that you can put assets into. They grow tax-free, and when you withdraw from them, they're tax-free. Roths, Roth 401ks, Roth SEPs, Roth simples, anything that is of the Roth nature. Therefore, the tax is 0%. Obviously, we've got a little graphic down there from red to green. Red is the worst tax, green is the best. So even if you're just moving income from ordinary into long-term capital gains under the present tax code, there is a benefit. Obviously, if you move it into the tax-deferred bucket, you don't get a benefit in the tax rate per se, but you certainly get a period of tax-deferred growth. Only the tax-free one is literally tax-free at 0. The other important component to understand, well, let me say, first of all, let me look at the client situation, kind of give you that sense before we drive delve into the other components of this. This client that we pulled, probably typical of many of you that are listening, 59 years of age, spouse is age 56. Got a net worth at $3.3 million, of which regular taxable stocks, bonds, investments, $112,000. Tax-deferred investments, about $1.2 million. Nothing in the tax-free bucket at this point. Got real estate equity of 1.9 and then some miscellaneous other stuff at about $100,000. Combined salaries and bonuses for a year is about $100,000. I'm sorry, it's 255,000. I'm reading up a line here. And the retirement age desired is about, say, age 64, spouse then being 61. We did modeling for that person based on what the current situation is, made some fine-tuning changes here and there to kind of optimize that, and ended up showing them that at age 97, they're going to be able to retire. Everything's going to be fine. They'll meet all their living expenses. They'll keep up with the rate of inflation, which is important. And they're going to have a net worth of approximately $5.5 million at the age 97. Kind of show that in this base model here. You can kind of see how that's a gradual growth over time. Again, he's going to retire at age 64, which we've got modeled, so you've got this growth. It flattens out a little bit and then starts to go up again. And we end up at 5.5 million and change. The problem here is that tax rates and minimum distributions are going to work against this particular client. We probably all know that the federal taxes, state taxes too, if you have them in your state, but federal taxes are graduated, meaning they go up as income goes up. I know this is a pretty big chart here, and it may be a little bit tough to see, but notice in the middle column, the married filing joint return numbers are the 10% tax bracket goes from zero taxable income up to 23, call it roughly $24,000 taxable income. Then the 12% bucket or tax rate goes from 23,000 to 96,000, et cetera. And we have brackets at 96 to 206, then from 206 to 394, 394 to 501, et cetera. Highest tax bracket right now at the time that we're doing this is federally 37%. So as income goes up, taxable tax rates are also going to go up. So each dollar at these bracket points gets hit with larger and larger taxes. For money that is inside of the tax-deferred bucket, remember this client had almost all of their money in the tax-deferred bucket. You get the tax deferral. You can even retire and delay withdrawing from that those accounts for a while. But when you get to about age 72 to 73, depending upon how old what your birth date is, you start to face required minimum distributions. And there's a table on the screen right now that is showing you for age 73 through 100 what the factor is. Now, this is the official part of the government table. They give a factor for each age. We've dropped in what the effective withdrawal rate is because we want you to understand how that is actually growing. How you calculate your required minimum distribution is that you look at a previous year's ending balance, so 12/31 of the previous year. You apply the factor by taking the balance, dividing it by the factor, and that becomes the current year's required minimum distribution. So let's make up something. Let's say it was $1 million balance at the end of 2024, and you're 73 in 2025. So your factor for 2025 would be 26.5 on the screen. You take the $1 million, you divide it by 26.5, and voila, you end up with your required minimum distribution. Now you know the math. What that is equivalent to is a 3.8% withdrawal rate. So when you're age 73, you're going to be required to withdraw 3.8% of whatever your previous year-end balance was. Then when you're 74, you do that same calculation, but now you're having to withdraw 3.9 and et cetera, fours into the fives, into the sixes. By the time you start getting into the your late 80s, 90s, they're getting you to withdraw 8 to 9, 10% or more. So on the one hand, if you're structuring your investment portfolio properly to sustain your living standard and to keep up with inflation, you're going to be growing by more than what you're withdrawing in the early years. And then pretty soon you're being forced to withdraw more and more, most likely more than you want to spend. So you're going to have to withdraw it from the IRA, the 401k. Even if you don't spend all of it, you can go reinvest that amount in a taxable account. But you have to pay the income tax on the amount of the withdrawal. So as these withdrawals get larger and larger and the balances are getting larger and larger, it gets geometric. And you get tax rates that are going up at the same time. The net effect for this person's particular situation is that their projected federal income tax brackets are going to eventually increase over time. There is going to be a bubble, or if you will, a little valley. Let's call it a valley, better expression. So notice that as retirement starts, that tax bracket's going to drop from 24% to 12%, because where they're earning right now in their earning years, they're right about at the 24% bracket. They're going to get a little bit of a reprieve when they retire because they don't have wages coming in. They can withdraw from some of the other some of the sources that they have. So they'll drop down to 12%. Momentary spike because of the big beautiful bill had some stuff that temporarily goes away. But there's another long period of time when they're going to be at a very attractive tax bracket. And then they jump back up to 22, and eventually they're going to get pushed into the 24% bracket. So in this situation, not as dramatic as it could be. We don't see them getting into the 35 to 37% tax brackets, but we do see them having opportunity. So they're going to enjoy some lower tax rates for a while and then kind of settle in at 22 for a bit. Again, this is all in the base plan, assuming that they just kind of take the required minimum distributions and go along as that plan would indicate. Roth conversions, and this is going to take some explanation, leverages lower rates to avoid higher future rates. So by purposely converting assets from the IRA, remember that's the tax-deferred bucket, into the Roth, the tax-free bucket, you're going to have to pay income taxes on the amount that you withdraw. So the conversion is taking money out of an IRA or a 401k. Got to pay taxes on that. But then sticking that money into a Roth, which is a tax-free bucket. You pay the tax now, you avoid future taxes. So what we've shown here is an overlay of the tax rates with what that taxable income looks like in a non-conversion situation and in a conversion situation. So the first line right here, the light blue one, that's the 10% tax bracket. Okay. Then we go up to, here's the 12% tax bracket. Then we would go up to the 22% tax bracket. And then ultimately we go up to the 24% tax bracket. So these are the ceilings. So from the base up to the blue line, you're going to pay 10% tax. From the blue line up to the green line, you're going to pay 12% tax. From the green line up to this yellowish line, you're going to pay 22. And any income from the yellow line up to this orange line, you would be paying at the 24% bracket. And of course, anything above we haven't hit the show. So the greened out, blued out area kind of overlapped together represents what income's going to look like. And I'm going to trace the blue line first. This is without conversion. So notice there's the dip, goes up here, it starts to come down, it comes down, it comes down, goes back up, and then it's gradually just going back up over time. That's what the taxable income is going to look like without the conversion. So notice that it stays under the 24% brackets in the 22% bracket most of the time. But there's this area here, the green, which is really standing out. Most of the time, the green and the blue areas are the same. This is the adjustable taxable income with the conversion. So we've got adjustable taxable income here with a conversion. It's green and it's blue, so it's within the same tax rate. But notice this little brief period of time when if he was not converting, he actually would have had lower income. But we're saying we could purposely convert in these years because we have this low tax rate. So if what we do is we look at the tax rate and we say, let's withdraw money each year, try to withdraw the amount of money that keeps you under a certain bracket, we can get a pretty significant advantage. In fact, by doing this, in this particular client situation, We can increase the net and portfolio value by roughly $2 million. That's in today's dollars. I wanted to keep it consistent for you. We would reduce the total required minimum distributions, which are taxable events, by $3.86 million. And we reduce total expected lifetime taxes by $560,000. Here's another way to take a look at that. These are the total projected assets, investment assets over time under the two situations. So notice that again, we've got the blue model, okay, here, and here's where the net worth, the taxable assets are kind of going, and notice how they're going to kind of end up at this point in time, okay? If he does the conversion, they're ultimately going to end up much higher. So by the time that we get out to age 97, the Roth conversions being done year by year would result in investable assets of roughly $2.9 million, as opposed to, if we didn't do any Roth conversions, they'd be $842,000. Now, many people look at this and going, yeah, but I'm 97. How much do I get to enjoy that benefit, that extra money? If you just want to look at it that way, I suppose that can be a very valid argument. But if you've got kids or grandkids, there is still a huge benefit to kids and grandkids because the future generations get that Roth. And it's tax-free money. But that's not to say that you don't get to enjoy a benefit in your own life. So what we wanted to plot on this curve is the benefit that you get. There is a brief period of time in here, this area right here, where the blue line is higher than the green line, where your projected investment assets are going to be lower if you're doing the Roth conversion than if you don't do the Roth conversion. Just think about it this way. Let's say you have $1 million in investable assets. If you don't do anything, you've got $1 million in investment assets. If you peel off $100,000 and you say, I'm going to put $100,000 in a Roth, well, okay, you've got $900,000 in an IRA or a 401k. You got $100,000 in a Roth, so theoretically you still got the same $1 million. But you've had to pay some extra tax in that year. So you take out the 30 grand or 40 grand, whatever it might be for the tax in that year, you're a little bit less. Your total assets combined in both the tax deferred bucket and in the tax-free bucket are a little bit lower than they would have been if you had not done the conversion. I'm not going to try to soft coat that and say it doesn't exist. But notice, starting at age 58, going up to retirement, okay, and then starting to make this conversion process, when he gets to age 81, we hit the crossover point. So from age 81 up to age 97, there is going to be a growing and real benefit to the person that's doing the Roth conversion. So it's not without benefits in your individual life. It just, depends on your unique situation. So what's critical here, before you just jump on the strategy and say, oh, it's great, I'm going to do it, is understanding what your needs are, how much you're going to have to withdraw from your account to sustain you, how much that account is going to grow, hopefully by a lot, and now what your tax rates are, because each year deciding how much to withdraw for the conversion depends on where those tax brackets were relative to where your income is, and trying to fill up, as we say, the lowest tax brackets up to the point where it makes no sense to do it. We certainly don't want to withdraw a whole bunch of money and push you up into the 32nd, 36th tax bracket in any given year. That makes 0 sense. But if you're at the 12% tax bracket, and we can keep it the 12% tax bracket, that's great. If you're already going to be at the 22nd, 24th% tax bracket, and there are places where we can keep you within that tax bracket, to us, it makes sense to do. Because the reality here, and I can't overstate this, the reality is every dollar that is in your tax-deferred bucket will be taxed. So if you've got $1 million in your IRA and you've just retired, that $1 million will be taxed. We don't know when it will be taxed because it's going to be taxed when you withdraw it. And there are required minimum distributions. You can't avoid it. You can delay it, but you can't avoid it. Ultimately, as you saw, those required minimum distributions get to be very, very big. So as in our example, let's say it's $1 million, as you start withdrawing pieces of that $1 million, you will be forced to withdraw every single piece of that $1 million. $1 million is going to be taxed year by year by year by year by year. We just don't know which year, and we don't know by how much because the tax rates are graduated. So if you think about what $1 million could grow to, it could grow to be $2, $3, $4 million. Well, if you didn't get it out of the tax-deferred bucket, then all of that growth is also going to be taxed. So the trick, the benefit of the Roth is getting it out of the taxable bucket, that tax-deferred bucket, paying the tax, which you have to pay anyway, but paying it at a year and at a rate that's advantageous for you, and then immediately getting it into the tax-free bucket and doing it in a way and at the time where there are sufficient years remaining for you as well as your heirs to generate and enjoy a benefit. So it's been a long and complicated video, and there's lots there. Play it a couple times if you want, but we'd love to hear from you. Try to look at your situation and work out the exact numbers. So appreciate it. You're listening. Love to hear from you. Thanks.